This is Terry Battisti with the Bass Fishing Archives, and I'm sitting here with Elite Series angler Mark Menendez, and we were just talking about the 13-pound record B.A.S.S fish that he caught in 1997 at Richland-Chambers. And I thought it would be a good video to have Mark explain all the aspects about that fish and how he caught it. So, Mark?
Well, your website is called Archives, so that means I'm getting gray hair and I'm getting older, so I'm becoming a historian instead of an angler. But it was a historical day. It was unexpected to be historical, Terry, but the weather conditions were leading kind of a perfect storm for these pre-spawn fish moving in at Richland-Chambers. Richland-Chambers was a lake that was known more for quality, not quantity. If you caught 5, you had the opportunity to bag a 25 to 28 pound sack of fish. That day I only had 4, but I had almost 27 pounds. And it was a slow moving tournament. Water temperatures were in the mid 50s, low to mid 50s, but the moon was coming, and it was March in Texas, mid Texas. And
perfect storm.
Perfect storm. We had a front move in from the north that had light winds and an overcast sky that you could take your rod tip and scratch the clouds. So light penetration was at a minimum, so these big fish were moving. I had figured a pattern out. The last little bit of deep water on creek channels leading to spawning areas, any standing timber, these big fish, these big females were suspended up in the top of those trees, 4 to 6 feet deep over whatever. But I had a starting area that was close, that was a spawning bay, and it was on. I mean, it was game on. You were catching lots of buck bass, lots of 2, 3, and occasional 4-pound fish. Started there the first day and caught a couple, then went to this big bass area the first day and ended up with about 16.5 pounds and was in great shape in the tournament. The next day, I run back to the starting area. There's 9 or 10 boats in there, and everybody in there is jacking. I mean, everybody's catching them, but me. Co-angler's catching fish. Doug Garrett catches a 9.15, a truck length in front of me. After about an hour and a half of that, I'd had it. And that day, it was extremely low light conditions, kind of patchy fog, and this is before we had GPS. And I had about a 10-minute run to run across the fork of this particular lake. It's in 2 different sections, the Richland arm and the Chambers arm. And I was going to run across the basin of that to get to my other area. So I take off, and I'm mad. Everybody's catching them but me. And I run right into the mouth of the creek that I had chosen for the second day. I drop the troll and I look around. I tell my partner, I said, you know, somebody's going to catch a giant today. Conditions are perfect. One day closer to the moon, 53, 54 degree water temperature, low light, a nice little chop on the water, and I had a spinnerbait in my hand. I was taking the spinnerbait and casting it past those big standing trees. And really cool, the place that I caught this fish. The last turn in the creek, the bottom of the creek channel was 22, top of it was 16, and there was 3 bushy, big hardwood trees right in that turn. I made a cast, I wind it through there on the left side of the tree, I fire it back out there, I let it go down. As I let it go down, I'm slow rolling that big spinnerbait, and it hits a limb, I pop it off, and it starts down, and I get a bite. I set the hook, and the fish immediately leaves that big bushy tree. Got 20-pound monofilament on there before fluorocarbon days. I'm winding the fish, and as it's coming to the boat, I tell my partner, I said, hey partner, I'm going to need some help. I see the flash of the fish. I said, this is a good one. This is a good 6-pound fish. So as it goes by the boat, it doesn't stop like a 6-pounder. So I literally put my thumb on my loose speed spool and put my thumb on it, locked it down, and stopped the fish from running. And it quartered away from me, from the boat, and it was right out there about 25 feet. And I see this fish come up. I still haven't gotten a good look at it. I make about 6 winds real hard. My partner reaches down there and grabs the fish with one hand, gets it with the other hand, and when he lifts her up, the spinnerbait falls out of the fish's mouth. She was never hooked. The gamakatsu hook hit her in the bone, and it curled that hook point. So it never penetrated, but it held her. And as he lifts her up, she begins to elongate. Now, I knew what the record was. Some other anglers had become close. Clun had caught a 12-10 at Richland, or at Sam Rayburn in a fall tournament, and I knew that the record was 12 pounds 13 ounces from 1973. Bob Tyndall caught that on the St. Johns River, and that record stood all that time. Well, I'd never seen a fish this big. In practice, Terry, I had caught one that I estimated at 11. but this one was, again, 20% bigger.
Wow.
It got rough that day. I stayed in that area. I caught 3 more bass. I caught a 5, a 6, and one that just barely made 14 inches, and I was kind of scared for that fish's life. You know, it would have become a 14 and a 15 and a half pounder had he eaten that one. I only weighed in 3. But as weigh-in came, I said, you know what, we need to go. And I reached down and I turned the motor over and it went click, click, click. But I had about 45 minutes to get in. Before my partner can say anything, I'm over the back, I've got jumper cables out, boom, off we go, and we run on in. I get to the weigh-in site and I pull in next to Ron Shuffield. And Ron, you got a mark? I said, I only got 4, Ron, but I got a good one. He said, well, let me see that. He said, hey, let me see that big old fish. And I reach in and I grab it and I look it up, I pick it up, and he looks at it and he turns white. And he says, oh my God, Mark, that's B.A.S.S history.
Yeah.
And he's the only person I showed. And before I could get up there, Ray Scott already knew that I had a giant.
Yeah.
Well, in those days, the fun with Ray was betting $1 on who could get the weight right. Well, I was so excited. I said, Ray, I don't want to bet. I'll just hand you the $1. Tell me how much this fish weighs. And he says, that fish is going to weigh 13 pounds and 9 ounces. And he got it right.
Holy crap.
He got it right. I didn't catch that until after I saw the footage on the Bassmasters television show. But the cool thing about this fish was she did go into the share lunker program. She was spawned. The spawn was put back into Richland-Chambers to propagate that gene. The fish was 7 years old when she was caught. She lived 7 more years. Now, the anglers that enter into the share lunker program have options. 1, they can release the fish back into the lake. 2, you could have a fish sandwich. And 3, you could have a mount made of it. And at that part, the Texas Wildlife was giving you a mount to put it in the program.
Right.
But I wanted to do something special with it. And she ended up living 7 more years in the great state of Tennessee at the Chattanooga Aquarium, the Tennessee Aquarium in Chattanooga.
Just around the corner from here.
Right downstream from here. And she lived 7 years, and 1 million school kids a year got to see this giant bass.
Wow.
There was a big narrative with my picture and the significance of this fish, the historic value of Bassmaster competition. You know, because one of the first bass clubs was the Chattanooga Bass Club.
Yeah, it was the first affiliated with Bass.
Right. And so there's a rich bass history in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
She lived a very peaceful life and lived to be 14 years old. The most unique part of the story was my partner's name, which I failed to mention. And Bass Word Terrier, this is the truth, the man's name was Noble Handy.
Totally goes with the story.
So when you get there and you find out your partner's that, you know he's going to be a quick net man, and he reached down there and got that fish for me. But
that's awesome. Well, so tell me about the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait was a lake-specific spinnerbait.
Well, it was a Texas thing. It was a half-ounce spinnerbait, no big deal. Had a number 4 Colorado and a number 4.5 gold willow on it. It had a chartreuse head on it. The skirt was the thing. It was odd. That lake was a very chalky colored water.
Right.
And a chartreuse and white spinnerbait just does not have that pop that it has in this nice, pretty green water we have behind us.
Yeah.
But the cantaloupe color, the interior of a cantaloupe, really held its integrity.
Yeah.
Now I did modifications to it. I added 5 strands of red to the spinnerbait skirt because when you're in Texas, you got to have red on whatever you're throwing.
Right.
And I added a 4.5-inch white ribbon tail trailer to it to create some bulk.
Yeah.
And that was the one cast that kind of was heard around the world, and I held the record for a couple years. And we started going to California, and a fish 1 pound bigger was caught a couple of years later. But that solidified my career right there in one cast.
That's awesome. Well, hey man, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Terry.
Anytime.